Thank you so much for being here. This is our first concurrent session of the day, and we're going to kick it off with a session on community-owned commercial space. We've got Dominique Russell and Steve Johnston, who will both be presenting. Dominique is the co-chair of the Kensington Market Community Land Trust, and Steve Johnston is the executive director of Community Impact Real Estate. Welcome both.
Yeah, great, thank you. I think I've got this thing, so I don't need that. Welcome everybody, thank you for taking time to be here in our session this morning. It's great to see a full room. My name is Steve Johnston, I'm the Executive Director of Community Impact Real Estate. I'll try not to sprint through this, but I know we've got limited time and I want to make sure that we can hear from everyone. Before I begin though, I just want to say I'm really pleased to be here with you on the unceded traditional and ancestral territory of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. And I often think about the work we do on these lands through a lens of economic reconciliation and how we leverage real estate as a means to build community economic development and create a thriving and prosperous community for all of our residents, but particularly keeping the high percentage of Indigenous folks that live in this community foremost and front and center in that work. So thank you and welcome. Great, so we're here to talk about community-owned commercial space and community impact real estate. Why community impact real estate? We're an organization that manages approximately 120,000 square feet of commercial real estate in Vancouver's downtown peninsula. Most of that is within the downtown EastSide neighborhood proper. We were formed in 2017, and there was a recognition amongst some really important players in local government, in community foundations, in the housing sector, that recognized there was a lot of commercial real estate assets in stressed communities that were being undervalued or underutilized. In the case of BC Housing, many of the hotels that now form our social housing infrastructure have commercial retail spaces at grade. And the housing authority being invested in housing would typically lease those to whoever brought the best business proposal forward. But there was often no relationship between the commercial real estate, the residents who lived upstairs, and the broader community. The money that was generated from those spaces went back into the general provincial coffers. So there was no direct relationship between the revenue that was generated circling back into the community where those spaces were located. A few visionary folks had the idea that we could do better, and those assets could be repurposed, managed by community, to deliver a more circular investment of money back into the neighborhood with a strong lens on community economic development. So after a very laborious and difficult negotiation with the province, with lots of lawyers, we arrived at the formation of a new not-for-profit, which was Community Impact Real Estate. We are an independent, arm's length, self-governed not-for-profit with our own board, designed to be a receptacle for contributions of commercial real estate so that we can take a community ownership model and execute on that. Our goal, like I said, is to drive and accelerate change through community economic development. And our portfolio of tenants is very broad. So everything from for-profit business to not-for-profit to social enterprise to BIPOC-owned, diverse-owned small business. And it's meant to be a business accelerator and a hedge against gentrification in this neighborhood. So we see continuing escalation in commercial real estate rates, which is pricing out many of the not-for-profit service providers that need to be here because of the density of social housing. So our goal is to maintain a degree of commercial retail affordability so those folks can be in community where their residents live and support them more fully. Before I kind of fully dive into the model, I think it's really important to understand this community in particular. And I won't dwell on this for too long. I have a much longer version of this that goes deep. But this community, the downtown east side, the downtown peninsula of Vancouver, it's been built off of displacement. We have a history of displacement in this neighborhood that has led to the conditions that you see outside today. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that and to claim it and to know it. Displacement started when the first people were removed from their villages just over here and put into reservations. Displacement happened in the 1940s during internment when we depopulated Japantown, which is just a little bit to the northeast of us. Displacement happened in the 1960s when Hogan's Alley was depopulated. It was Vancouver's heart of the Black community, and the businesses' homes were repossessed by the city to build a highway. that community has never returned in the way that it did prior. And I know there's Hogan's Alley is here today, and they're working amazingly to rebuild what that was. In 1986, we had a World's Fair. We had Expo 86. And that was the first version of a mass renoviction in this neighborhood. Over 600 hotel rooms that served as affordable housing were repurposed for tourists. That displaced over 600 people and led to 2 suicides out of despair. We can kind of see that this history of displacement has happened all the way up and until today. The most recent version of displacement is through involuntary care and mandatory treatment. So once again, we're seeing forced displacement of people in this neighborhood, the removal of things. And that's been the history here. It's been the removal of things, thriving businesses, thriving communities, thriving populations. And before I go into the work we do and why we do it, it's just really important, in my opinion, to understand that. Because I think in all of the ways that we work collectively, in the communities that we function in, and in real estate in particular, it's a history of taking. And that's why land is so important. That's why real estate is so important, because we need to take community ownership and reinvest in the neighborhoods and where we're at. So as you spend your time in Vancouver and you walk through this community, just know it didn't happen organically. The way we look today is the result of deliberate policy decisions, economic decisions, historical forces that have always punched down on the poor. Rant over. So how are we different from a typical community land trust? We're not a land trust. We operate under a head lease model. So we essentially are a tenant across that 120,000 square feet, or approximately 55 different units of real estate, on a long-term head lease that currently expires in 2037. So I think when government, the city, Van City Community Foundation thought about this, they thought, no one's done it before. We should probably set this up with some guardrails in case it doesn't work. So we were given 25 years to demonstrate success. We've been operating the portfolio since about 2018 fully, and I would say that we have far exceeded anyone's expectations about how commercial real estate can create community development and accelerate growth and support residents in this community. We're currently in negotiations with BC Housing, our prime partner, about what a longer-term version of a head lease might look like. Right? Building off the success, I want to go back and say 25 years is not enough. We want long-term. Give us 40, give us 45, give us 50. That takes courage and political will. We'll see where that lands, but we're constantly building that business case. And to be frank, when we're talking to government, it's a business case about why this model makes sense and why it returns value over and above the uses before. So like I said, we have about 55 different units. We're designed to create value for the neighborhood, and we're entirely self-funded. So we don't take on any outside funding. Whatever we generate through the portfolio is how we sustain our operations. And we do that through an approach that we call a blended or a curated model. So approximately 40% of our tenants, 45 is probably the current number right now, we lease out to for-profit businesses, and they pay market rent. Market rent in this community is insanely high. And that allows us to cross-subsidize the back half of our portfolio that we can provide to our non-market tenants for up to $0 base rent, which is where that deep, deep affordability comes into play. We do pay the province for every square foot that we occupy. So this isn't a freebie and it's not a gift. We have a negotiated base rental rate for the entire portfolio that's indexed to cost of living and inflation. So it escalates year over year, just like everything else does. But it is obviously a deeply discounted and affordable rate. And it's that delta between what we charge our market tenants that allows us the operating cash to cross-subsidize for our non-market tenants. One of the other things we do that's really interesting, I think is unique in commercial leasing, is we've added a schedule to our lease called social benefit covenants. It's on schedule, it's legally binding. There's a hammer if we ever needed to use it. We don't want to use it. But it's designed to say to our tenants, it's great that you're in the portfolio. It's great that you're part of the community, and we use that rent money to do some really wonderful things. But can you do more? Is that enough? Is there something more? It's meant to be collaborative and non-prescriptive, and it really just builds off the value of the business, where it's located, and who lives around it. So for our non-market tenants, it's just really clear how that works. Potluck Cafe Society is a social purpose caterer. They hire locally. Their social benefit is very clear and very well defined. But the Lamplighter Pub in Gastown, how do you pull social value out of that? What does that look like? What does that mean? For the Lamplighter, they are occupying a CRU in a mixed-use building with social housing above. Most of the residents can't access that business for a variety of reasons, whether it's stigma, economic, affordability reasons. They can't participate in their own community in the business in their building. We talked to the operators of that bar and we said, look, you guys have a commercial kitchen, you make food. We have hungry people upstairs. Could your social benefit covenant be providing meals to the residents in that building? We negotiated that with them, and then we looked at their base rent, and we kind of said, well, this looks like about a $40,000 annual commitment. We'll drop your base rent by, maybe $2 a square foot from market to give you a little bit of added benefit, right? So we can sweeten the deal with our tenants to incentivize their participation in the programs. Most, to be quite honest, enthusiastically embrace the opportunity. We have another business, De Beppe Restaurant, brilliant Italian restaurant, great pizza, good food, good drinks. Expensive. Women live in the building upstairs. Again, not able to afford to be in that space, maybe feel stigma about trying to go there as a customer. Business hated the residents initially. We're always getting flooded. They always clog the toilets. We always have these problems. These people. And the residents didn't like the business. These gentrifiers are taking over my community and they're driving up the prices. We do a food program there. The women used to order Domino's pizza about every 2 weeks as a social meal. De Beppe stepped in and said, you know what, we'll do that. We'll supply that meal. 3 months down the road, all of their chefs know the women on a first name basis. The women know the staff. And as an unintentional added benefit, we've seen a marked decrease in vandalism and property damage on that particular unit, because the community saw the value of that business and the fact that it wasn't just an outlier to serve other people, but it genuinely cared for the residents in the building, and they took ownership over the space. Less vandalism, less broken windows, less graffiti. We didn't forecast that, we didn't foresee that, but it happened, and we were kind of like, whoa, that's fantastic. So that's a little bit about how we operate. I've got some older statistics from last year. We're just doing our new annual report now about what the total value is of our portfolio, social value that we invest back into the community. Right now, it's about $2.8 million in financial impact, and that's just the local hiring that happens through our businesses. So some of the ways that we incentivize benefit covenants is local procurement. Can you redirect your shopping to local? Can you hire locally, or can you do food or hospitality-based programs? It's about 2.8 million. We've seen about 136 employees receive employment support and training through our tenants. So there's an employment uplift in a community that suffers from really high unemployment. We've got more than 32 folks participating in the social benefit covenants. I think we're up to about 48 out of our 55 have legally binding covenants on lease to participate in the program. And we've seen majority of our businesses begin to shift their local purchasing procurement practices. Been tremendously successful. I was just looking at the raw numbers. The social value, the financial impact, is now about 4.8 million for this past year. So it is growing almost exponentially as we continue to embrace the model and really heavily invest in it. This is really quick. Again, a little bit dated. I have to update this, but it just shows the breakout of who's in the portfolio. Women's organizations. We're working really hard to expand First Nations in the portfolio. And just as an aside, I'm challenging my board and my staff to think about what does economic reconciliation in real estate look like. I had a leader in this community, Norm Leach, say, how do you work in real estate on stolen land? Like, mind blown. So we're looking at a way to give first right of refusal to new vacancies to Indigenous organizations or entrepreneurs first. And go to the community and say, here's the opportunity. Is this something that you feel you can take advantage of? Is this the right fit for you? Have that first right of refusal. And if it's not the right fit, which is often the case for a variety of circumstances, then we'll go to market. But thinking about prioritizing reconciliation through real estate as our first stop and then building out from that point. We have arts and culture. We just opened up a comedy club, a nonprofit comedy club in Gastown, Little Mountain Gallery, tremendous arts addition to the downtown community. Small business, poverty reduction, employment services, medical services. We have community eye care, so someone who's providing affordable eye care to residents, waiving the copay. We've got Life Labs and a few groups like that. What else do we do? We've built this reservoir of knowledge around leasing. Leasing in particular, which a lot of folks in the not-for-profit don't fully understand, particularly commercial leasing. So we do a lot of consulting with community-based partners about how to find and acquire space, how to negotiate with a landlord to get the best deal, what can you ask for, what terms should you be cognizant of, what are the pitfalls, what do you need to look out for. We keep an architect on retainer that we can deploy when projects are going through tenant improvement operations to navigate the building and licensing process, which is incredibly difficult in most cities, particularly here. Peer work. We do partner with the federal government to provide peer wages for folks in this neighborhood to deliver direct services to other unhoused folks. Didn't think we were going to do it. It's a legacy of COVID when we were asked to take this work on as an administrative trusted partner. Feds liked it, and we're still doing it. So happy to provide that service. We run a community collaborative network called the Community Coordinated Response Network. Again, another legacy piece from COVID. We brought together through that experience at sometimes 50 to 60 organizations 3 times a week to talk about business continuity and surviving the COVID experience, whether they were housing providers, small businesses. How do we collectively as a community get through this? The need remained. People still show up every Wednesday. I'm always amazed, 35, 40 organizations every Wednesday. So we host that because it has value to the community. Again, as a bit of an aside, because we generate all of our revenue internally through our own real estate, we're not in competition in the same way with our community partners for scarce resources. So it gives us a bit of neutrality and the opportunity to operate in a different way and support others in the work that they do. We bought a grocery store. Didn't think that was going to happen. One of our tenants, they were going to exit the business, and it was the only affordable grocery in probably a 2-kilometer radius. So we're in a bit of a food desert. We saw the value of that space and thought, well, let's just buy it, stabilize it, flip it. My coworker, my director of portfolio, apparently loves grocery work. He's convinced us to keep it. So we've made heavy investments in the Washington community market. You can stop by. It's in the Maple Hotel just at the corner here. It is a standard cash business. It's just affordable. It's not a charity. We sell the food, but we give residents in this neighborhood the opportunity to make choices about what they eat and how they acquire that food and return that value and dignity to their lives. It's a very heavy subsidized food model in this community, like many, where it's charitable. And here's your food for tonight, and if you don't like it, well, that's your dinner. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's a place in the food ecosystem for all of these types of interventions. We just found that people want choice, including our unhoused folks. So we break down a box of cereal into single serving sizes and baggies, and if you're unhoused, you can come in, get a single serving, get milk, choose what you want, eat. We've added a hot food section. We sell out of hot dogs now daily. Surprisingly, we're more expensive than Costco, which is like a kilometer away, and yet people still come to us because of the customer service and the relationships. And we have a B2B portal on the back end to cross-subsidize the low barrier employment. So we're now selling wholesale in bulk to our community partners. 312 Main is one. If you get up to the second floor in this building, we actually have a vending machine that we operate for this building that we stock. Inside tip, really cheap to get a vending machine, like 300% return on sales. It's phenomenal. I had no idea. So now we're putting vending machines into other spaces. So we'll buy them. For our social enterprise partners, Mission Possible runs a great service doing landscaping and community work. They often have cold drinks. They asked us if we would get them a vending machine. We said, yeah, we'll buy that for you. You have to stock it through the Washington community market, and you have to buy from us. So we're placing these into community, and it's a revenue generator that allows us to keep the affordability of our food in that store quite low. We do other grants and non-market tenant investments, so we just invest in our spaces over and above a typical landlord's tenant improvement allowance. Where are we going? So I'm really cognizant that our portfolio is currently entirely BC housing, which obviously carries a lot of risk. A change in government, a change in leadership could end us. So it's been my mission to diversify the portfolio. One of the things I've really been diligent on is working with our next most logical partner, and that's the City of Vancouver. City of Vancouver is a tremendous landlord, owns a lot of property, a lot of commercial real estate. Very difficult to pry it out of their tight hands, but we're making progress. So we're making progress in that direction, and I think there's a growing awareness that city assets can be leased to a group like ours below market, because that social return will alleviate stress on a whole number of other budget levels. It's a hard argument to make with the real estate folks. They often, I feel, see themselves as private developers, and they hold that very close. And they have a mandate to return value to the city, and I understand that. So we're just being creative in those conversations. We're looking at acquisition. So as we begin to build surpluses off of our work, can we begin buying either single CRUs scattered throughout the neighborhood so they're permanently affordable because they'll be under our ownership, and build equity and longer term sustainability? We're looking at buying mixed use buildings with partners. One of my dreams is to say, on a housing affordability challenge, wouldn't it be great to have a mixed use building with some CRUs that support the operations of the building so that we can offer housing to the baristas, to the waiters, to the frontline service workers in our community that right now often commute 2 hours to come here to work because they can't find affordable housing in their own neighborhood. So we're talking with different partners about what that might look like and how we do that. And then finally, just expansion to other jurisdictions. The model's been proven to work. We've been in operation now for 7 years. We started with a budget of 1.6 million. We're now over 5. Not huge in the global not-for-profit world, but we're growing annually. We've just registered a property management company, so we will now be a licensed brokerage. So we can provide property management services, not just for ourselves, but for our community partners who might have real estate and not really understand how to capture the full value from it, as well as providing property management for private strata just as a revenue generator so that we can do other work. I anticipate that by next year when that's operational, that'll take our budget to over 8 million, and the sky's the limit from there. And expansion to other jurisdictions, like I was saying, the model works. It's been proven to work. We've had a lot of interest from Saskatoon. Interestingly enough, I didn't see that coming, but more in City of Toronto. City of Toronto is much like Vancouver. Toronto Community Housing is a huge landlord, owns a tremendous amount of commercial real estate. City of Toronto owns a tremendous amount of commercial real estate. They suffer from the same challenges. How do they tenant that real estate in a way that drives value for the residents in their buildings and for the broader community? You can't keep putting Shoppers Drug Marts and Tim Hortons in every building. It's saturated. That market's dead. So how do you find and identify opportunities for individual entrepreneurs, BIPOC entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs? In Toronto, it's more about business than it is about services. But to support that economic development at a very local, small way to allow them to build a business and thrive and grow in their communities. So I think I did it. Yeah. And hand that over to Dominique.
So I'm pressing this.
Yeah.
Is this on? So thematically, we're sort of moving in a similar direction to what you heard this morning from sort of the large scale to a very smaller neighborhood scale. So my name is Dominique Russell. I'm the co-director of the Kensington Market Commuter Land Trust. And Kensington Market is a small neighborhood in Toronto, mythified by numerous TV shows like King of Kensington and Twitch City. And we are a National Heritage Site. And we're a place of welcome for waves of immigrants and working class people who were pushed out of other places. The KMCLT comes out of neighborhood organizing around anti-displacement and anti-gentrification, initially focused on preserving the eclectic, chaotic blend of small businesses from the encroachment of big box stores. Kensington Market is the special place that it is, and so I should ask, like, how many of you know Kensington Market? So, there you go. Okay. How many of you not from Toronto, though? That's the, oh, I mean, oh, great. Okay. So it's this tight-knit community. And in part, the tightness of that community comes from the fact that it's the energy and creativity of small businesses that become places of gathering, places of where you just bump into people, and that creates a lot of community energy. Galleries, clubs, cafes, but grocery stores, barbershops. So 10 years ago, the concern was that rising rents were making it impossible for it was a market. I say it was, and that kind of hurts me, but it was one of the last open-air markets in North America. But it was more and more difficult to sell raw foods in that context, and that the rents could only be afforded by bars and restaurants, and that Kensington would become a destination, a place where people come from away to enjoy, but not a destination for the people that actually live here. One of the aspects of gentrification, is precisely that, the distance that starts to happen between the commercial and the residential. So in the intervening years, those threats to commercial affordability and to community cohesion have multiplied. So short-term rentals have drained our neighborhood of residents. So shifting the commercial environment and rents pushed up by corporate cannabis speculation. It's so ironic that it's like, oh, cannabis, it's the alternative. It is absolutely the incursion of the corporate in Kensington market through cannabis. That's pushed up rents, skyrocketing the rents and causing numerous vacancies. So we believe that the best way to protect the eclectic vibrancy of our neighborhood is to buy buildings. It allows us, within the parameters of the real estate market, to offer relatively affordable rents and offer security of tenure. The challenge is there's greater risk in buying commercial, and there's fewer supports from the government. Now, we know with less than 3.5% of non-market housing that there's not enough in terms of residential, but it makes the commercial side of things much more difficult. We bought our first building in 2021, 5456 Kensington Ave. So it's a Kensington landmark. It's the Stoop, the home of the punks. There's 5 commercial units and 12 residential. We were able to buy it through, if you know the Toronto system, Mura-like investment. So essentially, we received $3 million from a discretionary pool of funding that our city council was able to allocate. This is based on the 12 residential units, $250,000 per door, essentially. And that was a forgivable loan. It excludes the commercial, even if the commercial rents help us cover operating costs. We were less successful in our next attempt because, among other things, there was too much commercial. Now, if you know Kensington, and you do, you know that the residential is pretty well always attached to commercial. We've recently put an offer on a second building, and this time, thanks to a major donation and the success of our community bond campaign, we're doing it without any government financing. And I just touch some wood somewhere because it's not done, but we're getting there. So, I say about the community bonds, I'll say with a little bit of caution, because not every community will have the kind of buy-in that we have in Kensington Market, where people will say, look, I own a piece of this place, right? So, nevertheless, with that caution, the community bonds have given us some flexibility to buy more commercial space for our neighborhood. The community bonds also mean that any interest being made, it goes into the pockets of our neighbors and not bankers, and that's a really important principle for the KMCLT. As a mutual aid organization, to do together what we can't do individually and to share the benefits. So we plan to buy more buildings, but we're not going to buy everything. So we're also looking at other ways to support our small business ecology and promote non-extractive business practices. And I'll talk about a few of those initiatives later on. But before that, I want to talk about some of the challenges of owning commercial property. You'll see, lots of for rent, lots of vacancies. So similarly to getting your ideals tested when you actually own residential, where you think we're going to house our neighbors, and then it turns out that you have to take from the central waiting list, that not you want to house everyone, but you can't. There's that contrast between the ideal and what the actual practical. I want to talk a little bit about the realities of owning and stewarding commercial properties, which can clash with our more idealistic objectives. So, for example, the residents of Kensington Market would maybe want for their neighborhood something that's not viable for a small business. It's extraordinarily difficult to run a grocery store or a fruit stand. Business owners have told us again and again that now their main business base, their customer base, are actually tourists. And as one person said, who come and buy an apple with a credit card, which can make things difficult. So unless we get tax breaks for green grocers or some support for stabilizing the rent of this type of commercial activity, which at the moment doesn't seem to be possible, although I'd love to talk more with Steve about what those conversations might look like. We have to offer the space at a rent that allows us to pay our mortgage and allows us to grow as an organization, to buy more buildings, and that rent might be out of reach of an affordable green grocer. So it's also important to understand that commercial leases are different from residential. And commercial property management, it's different from residential. And so it can be difficult to find the ideal partner in managing those two different mixed-use building. So we really recently had the experience of losing a beloved barbershop when we signed a new lease. The barbershop was subletting from another well-loved long-term business owner, and because the terms of the original lease allowed for a renewal of 5 years, we had to sign with the subletter rather than with the barbershop. But it's a community member, right? So you expect that they'll allow the barbershop to stay. But it turns out that our intention to keep the barbershop at a fair market rate increase was thwarted when the sublease was increased considerably. So we may not have received the best advice on this, and we'll learn from this to prevent this ever from happening again. But I think it's important to talk about those challenges and the places that they think it's going to work and then it might not. And in this particular case, the ideals of community, security of tenure, and the distance between legality and ethics. It's a challenge for a neighborhood organization to skill up quickly in what is a very different field. So we're doing that through our conversations with our sister organizations like the Little Jamaica Community Land Trust, Toronto Chinatown, they're here, Community Land Trust. And by engaging in active research with working groups such as SBAN, a research cluster in the US, that's exploring options, examples, and possibilities of community wealth building with commercial ownership, co-ops, business trusts, and more. I said that we can't buy everything, and probably we wouldn't really want to, because the secret of a healthy business ecology is actually diversity. But we're looking at ways that we can help steward the commercial spaces. And so I want to share a couple of these possibilities. So first, what we're calling the Perlman list. So a list of businesses that would like to be in Kensington Market, what the requirements are, and property owners who might be looking for a tenant with an eye to what generally these property owners, there's not a lot of them, but they're out there, and what they're really interested in is bringing in a stable business that will be good for the neighborhood. And I'm going to say, I think we've made a match. So it can, in fact, work. And it's very exciting when you can do that and bring in a business into a space. So in line with this, we've been talking to businesses that have these very large spaces in Kensington Market. What do you do with these enormous spaces that used to be grocery stores? So they can be, they are being creatively shared. So this is an example of El Gordo, and it's a shared, they have this space, they share this space with these small business owners that then bloom out of there, and you might have heard of Rasta Pasta and other, forget all of the, but these restaurants that come out of this small space and then take up bigger spaces. So this is a kind of a business, it's like a community business incubator. It's spontaneous, and it's a replicable model that we might be able to support in our commercial units. Another use for these large spaces is food manufacturing. And if we can bring food manufacturing into Kensington Market, we can start to, so large spaces, small retail, nevertheless, food, the business ecology depends on people coming. There's still lots of food in Kensington Market, and if we can bring a few more food manufacturing in, we will be supporting the businesses that are there now. As a CLT, we hold the city somewhere between a grapple and an embrace. KMCLT was shocked to discover that after what seemed like a win, when City Council asked the provincial government to regulate commercial rents, then turned around and doubled the rent of one of the small businesses in Kensington Market, in a city-owned space. So we advocated for our neighbors. You might have seen Zach on the news doing that, and tried to get the city bureaucrats to allow us to steward those spaces. But the city insists that we need to get market rent. What is market rent? Market rent just means that it's the average. So it really just means like whatever, I don't want to use swear words, but like whoever wants to charge the highest rent, even if it's vacant, gets to decide essentially what the metrics of that market rent is. So we cannot be stewarding spaces that are unaffordable. So that didn't work out. But I have this dream for us to have a circuit. So a small sort of food truck, and then another space, hopefully that city space that we get to steward eventually, because the city will realize, perhaps in conversation, that this is not just about the highest dollar. It's really about that care, that space. How much small businesses mean to communities? We only notice it in Toronto. I think you notice it when you go by the monoculture. And you're really anywhere. which tourists actually love. So I have this dream for a small circuit, small food truck space that's been divided up, one of the city-owned spaces, and then a larger space where food entrepreneurs can test their ideas, get concrete support through reasonable rent, and create a following, ties to Kensington Market, assuring food security for our neighbours, which is going to be even more important as the CLT will be helping the city build 78 units of affordable housing on the parking lot. So this is going to be even more important because what you don't want to have is a completely separate residential and commercial where people just, they go, but there's no connection. If you've been to Kensington Market, one of the intangible things is that feeling of energy, of community. So if we were to build that circuit, it would be a continuation of the historical role of Kensington Market in Toronto as one of the last open-air food markets in North America, and as a place where new ideas emerge and where newcomers can make their place and get integrated into the city. So that's the dream. We'll take questions. Are you still mic'd? You're I don't know if we can. Oh, no. Not yet. We'll just stay there. So, any questions?
Yes, I'm very interested in this. Thank you very much, by the way. Very, very helpful as we think through different models of what has worked and hasn't worked. And thank you for sharing some of the failures and some of the traps as well that one might play into. And as you were talking about this, I'm from the Hope Valley Society, so we're thinking through a number of things that we need to, and the land trust model is one, but commercial is very much, I don't know if talked about it much because it's so short, but there is an intent to return to this space, what you mentioned earlier, the number of businesses that were lost. We lost all of these businesses that created something of a local community. And I wondered if you've given any thought to that aspect. This notion that you don't want your money to be circulating outside the community.
Yeah.
So how do you create some kind of circularity so that, this one buys from that one, right? Does work with that one. One of it's a barter, the other one is a site. But just wanted your thoughts on trying to increase circulation within the community of the money. Obviously, residents are part of that. If we can get them to buy here, but often after that, it's easy choosing out because then the supplies are coming in and things like that. So just wanted to have your thoughts.
I mean, I'll give a short answer. One of the losses I really feel with the barbershop is that it became this place where people would go and then they'd say, where can I get X? Where that starts to become a real gathering place for other businesses. There's a really close business ecology in Kensington. But that's one of the things that we really are thinking through is how do we trap those resources? So Kensington Market is now a tourist destination. And all the time I walk by and I see these people, I don't know who they are, and they're telling about the story of Kensington. It's like, we're going to do that in the community. We're going to do that. And I won't swear, but it's like, put the fuckers out of business. All those extractive things, we will do those things. And to find within the community the people that are doing that work, and that can be shared. But it's also a very porous place, so there's need to be also this sort of balance between welcoming. But we don't yet have sort of those kind of covenants that we're talking about where you're saying, okay, you're hiring local. But Kensington has this place where that kind of happens, you know. A store goes out of business and the people that own that store start to work in a neighborhood, a neighboring store. Like there is that kind of connection still.
I think just to pick up on that, we've tried to build an intentional feeling of community within our portfolio of tenants, right? So as from head landlord overseeing all of our tenants, we are making those connections amongst our businesses so they know who to buy from. A lot of times in our community, in the downtown east side, for-profit business don't know the array of options that are available to them from communities. So from the outset, our financial policies and procedures predicate or direct us to purchase from social enterprise first, or from a B Corp, or from a socially certified business. And, we extend that ethos into our portfolio so our tenants know about those options. So they're not buying from Aramark or from Cisco, right? But they know that there is an affordable grocer in Chinatown where they can get the produce that they want and support that local business. So a lot of it just, intentionally building community within the tenancy and then making direct connections between businesses and our tenants. I think here and then there, here, there, and there.
I'll make mine really quick. Would you be willing, or are you able to share maybe some of the covenants and like kind of what that structure looks like? So for anybody that was interested, like we might be exploring something like commercial. We'd love to see, instead of reinventing the wheel, if you're able to share, we'd love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that we're keeping secret, that's for sure. And it really is just adding a schedule to a commercial lease that says you are committing to doing X number of meals, or X dollar value of services, or X number of hiring from the community. We did find that we had to own and drive that program. So we have someone on staff, our manager of community economic development, and Hope is phenomenal, and she's taken ownership over that. So she does the data collection. She bridges the relationship between the commercial tenant and community. We give it to the tenants. They tell us what they think they can do. We take it away. We build it and then give it back to them. And essentially right now operationalize it for them to the point where we're giving them stories back so that they can talk about their good working community to their stakeholders. So it's not it's nice to have it that way, but it still requires a degree of investment. And once a tenant's been in that flow of providing those benefits for a year, for 2 years, then they're able to self-operationalize it. So it's building the capacity. But it really is like our social benefit covenants are 3 lines on a Schedule B tacked onto a lease. I think here and then.
Thank you so much, Dominique, for this presentation. I'm so glad to learn about the great work that's happening at Kensington Market. But my question is for you. I'm sorry to catch your name.
Steve.
Steve,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I'm curious about your first right of refusal for the East businesses. And I was wondering how that's going, and in situations where there's been a decline on that, what's been the barrier, what's been the gap that's been identified there?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. We don't know. We're in the process of figuring out what that looks like. So I've gone back to my board in the past year and said, we need to think about the real estate in a different way. And my concept is moving to a first right of refusal. So we are working at a board level to enshrine that in our governance documents so that it becomes policy for the organization so it exists in perpetuity. I would be really excited to come to a seminar like this next year and tell you we had our first go around and this is what worked and this is what didn't. I think for me, it's just starting with making the opportunity available first, and really just prioritizing connecting with all of our community partners in the urban Indigenous community or within the other local bands that make up our Indigenous landscape, and offering them that first. There will be hiccups, there will be challenges, always, but commercial leasing is full of hiccups and challenges, So we still have to do our due diligence. We still have to vet those tenants. We still have to make sure that it's a viable, so I'm gonna step away from the speaker because I'm getting feedback. We still need to make sure that it's a viable opportunity, that they will be successful, that they have the ability to pull it off. So I don't know how that's gonna play out. It's a journey that I'm looking forward to talking about, hopefully in our next annual report and bringing some concrete data back. But I think there's just a recognition that we have assets. We have an obligation to support reconciliation. Vancouver is a city of reconciliation, and now how are we actually going to do that? We've talked about it, and it's a great thing to think about all the calls to action. What does it look like in actuality? So we're going to dive in, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
My comment was actually to offer support around the Golden Valley question about the procurement policy. And so I actually just wanted to offer to support on that question if you wanted to speak of it afterwards. Like we did for this building, 312 Main, the intention is to create a space with the privilege of stewarding a space like this. You can also set the requirements for those organizations you lease to demand that they have a social procurement policy or what those policies might look like, and that's a big part of the evaluation process. But who gets to rent space in this building and what kinds of events we may host in this building as well. So just wanted to offer that resource.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more? Yeah.
Hi there. Thank you both so much for, really, really interesting. I wanted to sort of ask this question to both of you because I think this is a common question that I run across a lot. How do you think about making the case, business case or otherwise, around the social impact of the work that you're doing? And whether it's quantified or in other ways. Just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Metrics are something we're always working on and trying to improve so that we can present a solid business case for our outcomes. So we start by looking at rent alleviated in our case. So through our affordable rent provision, what does that translate to in real dollars? Because that's a direct operating assistance to so many not-for-profits that struggle to get operating dollars to be in real estate. So that's a concrete number. Numbers of meals served is where we're headed through our covenants program. So just tracking all the ways the social benefit covenants are playing out in real time, how many folks were employed. And then I think, it depends how far you want to take it. So you can then build backwards and say, well, if someone's employed, they're paying CPP and, all of those statutory deductions and they're paying taxes. And it's proven that people have jobs, they shop locally. So there's a general uplift to the community. So you can kind of take a more deep dive into social return on investment style metrics, and kind of point to $1 in produces $3 out on the other side. So that's one way to get at it.
I'll say that we sort of got into the commercial because of the nature of the neighborhood, and we're not really, at the moment, we're doing that part on our own. And so for us to start to create those metrics is kind of to mathematize something that is so intangible. But at the moment, I feel that the City of Toronto, it really falls on deaf ears. So we haven't put a great deal of effort into trying to convince them. But I think as you sort of systematize how you're choosing your tenants and those kind of things, those become shareable benefits. And the City of Toronto is desperate to find ways to strengthen their main streets. So I think it's something that we'll be working on, but through the same sort of lens of employment. Like, it's astonishing. These small places employ so many people. So for us, that would be the main metric, because how are you going to, tourist dollars, I don't care about that. How do you describe community,
Yeah.
Would you recommend people starting there, or letting it evolve?
Let it evolve. Yeah, we learned a lot working with a third-party property manager, and it was incredibly difficult, but I think based on that experience, we're more confident now saying, okay, we're going to take this on ourselves and own this work and drive it.
Thank you so much, Dominique and Steve. Round of applause. Yes. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience.